Jameson, Postmodernism, or the Cultural Logic of Late Capitalism, and Overview and Analysis. Fredric Jameson's Postmodernism, or the Cultural Logic of Late Capitalism, first published in 1991, is a foundational text in cultural theory and critical theory that explores the nature of postmodernism as both an aesthetic and social phenomenon, deeply linked to the economic and social structure of late capitalism. Jameson, a Marxist literary critic and theorist, provides a dense, complex, and historically situated analysis of postmodern culture, arguing that postmodernism should be understood not simply as an artistic or cultural style, but as the dominant cultural logic that emerges from the specific economic conditions of global late capitalism. Context. Who is Fredric Jameson? Fredric Jameson is an American literary critic and Marxist political theorist known for his wide-ranging analyses of literature, film, and culture through the lens of Marxist theory. His work bridges political economy, psychoanalysis, and cultural studies. Jameson's scholarship consistently emphasizes the dialectical relationship between culture and the political economic conditions that produce it. Postmodernism, or the cultural logic of late capitalism, represents one of Jameson's most influential and widely cited contributions, where he links aesthetic shifts to transformations in capitalist economic structures. The thesis, Postmodernism as the cultural logic of late capitalism. At the heart of Jameson's argument is the idea that postmodernism is the cultural dominant form of the current phase of capitalism, which he calls late capitalism. This phase is characterized by global capitalism's expansion, multinational corporations, technological advancements, and the increasing commodification and financialization of culture. Jameson situates postmodernism historically as a break from modernism, which itself emerged alongside industrial capitalism. Whereas modernism was tied to an industrial society focused on production, progress, and formal innovation, postmodernism corresponds to a society where consumption, simulation, and pastiche dominate. For Jameson, understanding postmodernism requires understanding its relationship to the economic base of late capitalism. The superstructure, culture, art, ideology cannot be detached from the base, economic relations. Key features of postmodernism. According to Jameson identifies several formal and thematic characteristics of postmodern culture, linking them to the economic and social changes of late capitalism. 1. Pastiche and parody, without satire. Jameson argues that postmodern culture is marked by pastiche, which differs from parody. While parody mocks or critiques its source, pastiche is a blank imitation without critical distance or political edge. It is an empty copying of past styles, reflecting the loss of historicity and critical engagement in postmodern culture. This reflects the recycling of cultural forms under late capitalism. Up 2. Schizophrenia and fragmentation. Drawing on psychoanalytic language, Jameson describes postmodern cultural products as exhibiting a kind of schizophrenic temporality and spatiality, fragmented, decentered, and without a unifying narrative or subjectivity. This corresponds to the fragmented and decentered social experience produced by global capitalism, which undermines stable identities and cohesive historical narratives. 3. Depthlessness and surface. A key feature of postmodernism is what Jameson calls depthlessness, a flattening of cultural experience where surface effects dominate over deeper meaning or ideological critique. For example, in architecture, postmodern buildings might emphasize playful or eclectic facades without deeper structural innovation. This aesthetic mirrors the capitalist logic of focusing on style, branding, and spectacle rather than substance. 4. Schizophrenia and temporal disjunction. Jameson discusses how postmodernism collapses historical time into a perpetual present through recycling of past styles, leading to a loss of historical consciousness or historicity. This phenomenon is visible in what Jameson calls the waning of historicity, where cultural artifacts fail to embed themselves in a historical narrative, instead endlessly referencing past cultural forms. 5. The end of grand narratives. Echoing Jean-François Lyotard's famous formulation, Jameson also identifies the postmodern condition with the collapse or skepticism toward grand narratives, or meta-narratives, that used to provide coherent, universal explanations for history and culture, such as Marxism, Enlightenment progress, or religion. This skepticism is symptomatic of late capitalism's fragmentation. Postmodernism and the Logic of Capitalism. For Jameson, postmodernism is not merely a stylistic phenomenon, but an expression of the new mode of capitalism. The transition to late capitalism means that culture increasingly becomes commodified, packaged, and marketed as part of a global consumer system. Consumerism and simulation. The culture of postmodernism embraces consumerism and simulation. Authenticity is replaced by simulacra, copies without originals, where representations refer only to other representations. This leads to a hyper-reality in which the boundary between the real and the simulation blurs, a concept developed alongside but distinct from Jean Baudrillard. The globalization of culture. Postmodernism reflects the global reach of capitalism, with cultural production becoming increasingly deterritorialized and globalized. This results in cultural forms that are hybrid, fragmented, and pastiche-like, lacking firm roots in local or national histories. The waning of affect. Jameson suggests postmodernism produces a kind of emotional detachment or waning of affect, where cultural products fail to inspire strong emotional or ideological commitments, reflecting the alienation and commodification of experience under capitalism. Jameson's dialectical method and critique. Unlike some postmodern theorists who embrace the cultural condition uncritically, Jameson offers a dialectical critique grounded in Marxist thought. He insists on maintaining a historical materialist perspective to resist the tendency to simply celebrate postmodernism's aesthetic innovations without acknowledging their socio-economic context. The return of ideology. Postmodernism complicates ideology, but it does not eliminate it. Jameson highlights that postmodern culture masks the contradictions and inequalities of capitalism behind spectacle and consumption, and ideology is still at work beneath surface frivolity. Reclaiming historicity. One of Jameson's aims is to reclaim historical consciousness against the postmodern erasure of history. He argues for a re-engagement with history as a necessary part of cultural critique. Impact and influence. Jameson's postmodernism, or the cultural logic of late capitalism, has become a key reference in cultural studies, sociology, political economy, and literary theory. His work laid the groundwork for understanding the connections between cultural forms and economic structures, influencing debates about globalization, consumer culture, media, and art. Critical framework. Jameson provides a powerful critical framework for analyzing contemporary culture in relation to capitalism, emphasizing that cultural phenomena cannot be understood outside of their material conditions. Bridging high and popular culture. By examining architecture, film, literature, and art, Jameson bridges the divide between high culture and mass popular culture, demonstrating how postmodernism permeates multiple spheres. Criticism of postmodernism's politics. Jameson's critique also points to postmodernism's political ambivalence or conservatism, given its reluctance to engage in transformative critique or radical change. Criticisms and debates. While highly influential, Jameson's thesis has also attracted various critiques. Overdetermination by economics. Some critics argue that Jameson's economic determinism reduces complex cultural phenomena to mere reflections of capitalism, neglecting autonomy or multiple causality in culture. Vagueness of late capitalism. The concept of late capitalism is sometimes criticized as too broad or vague to effectively capture the nuances of economic and cultural changes. Pastiche versus parody. The distinction Jameson draws between pastiche and parody has been questioned, as some see postmodern cultural products as more politically engaged or ironic than Jameson allows. Historical specificity. Some argue Jameson underestimates the continuing relevance of modernist or pre-postmodernist forms in contemporary culture. Conclusion. Fredric Jameson's Postmodernism, or the cultural logic of late capitalism, remains a landmark text for understanding the cultural dynamics of our contemporary world. His incisive Marxist analysis reveals postmodernism as more than an aesthetic style. It is a cultural expression deeply embedded in and reflective of the economic and social structures of late capitalism. Jameson challenges readers to look beyond surface appearances and stylistic quirks, insisting on the necessity of historicizing and politicizing cultural critique. By situating postmodernism within a broader political-economic context, he offers a framework to understand the complex interplay of culture, economy, and ideology in a globalized capitalist system. For anyone interested in cultural theory, media studies, or Marxist critiques of contemporary culture, Jameson's work remains essential reading, a profound meditation on the aesthetics and politics of the present age.